God of War. Sounds grand, doesn't it? But that's precisely what artillery has been called throughout history. Not by chance, for it was artillery, with its steel lungs, that could decide the outcome of a battle, turn the tide of history. And when it comes to Soviet artillery, especially that which fought and triumphed during the Great Patriotic War, one name immediately comes to mind: Nikolai Voronov. A man who didn't just command cannons, but breathed soul into them, turning them into a flawless mechanism capable of crushing any enemy. He didn't just lead, he created, he shaped, he foresaw. His ideas, his decisions, became the foundation of that firepower that shook the world. Without exaggeration, Voronov was the one who defined the image of the God of War in the 20th century, making it truly omnipotent. His personal contribution to the development of artillery and, consequently, to victory cannot be overstated. But before becoming Chief Marshal of Artillery, before his name resounded across the world, Nikolai Voronov was an ordinary boy from St. Petersburg. He was born in 1899 into a family of civil servants. What does that mean? Not a nobleman, not a merchant, not a peasant. A typical urban family, living by its own rules, dreaming of stability and prosperity. Who would have thought that this boy, born on the eve of a new century, would become one of those who would change the course of history? His childhood fell on a turbulent time. At the turn of the century, Russia was seething, preparing for great upheavals. And these upheavals could not but affect the formation of young Nikolai's character. He grew up in an atmosphere of change, absorbing the spirit of the time, its anxieties and hopes. The First World War, which began when he was only 15 years old, became the first serious test. Whether he did not fight on the front, he saw how the world around him was changing, how people were mobilizing, how the country was straining all its forces. It was a school of life, cruel and merciless. And then, the revolution. Even 3 revolutions. February, October. It was a real tectonic shift, turning everything upside down. And in this chaos, in this maelstrom of events, young Voronov made his choice. In 1918, at the age of 19, he voluntarily joined the Red Army. In 22, he was already graduating from the 2nd Petrograd artillery courses. This was not just a choice of profession, it was a choice of path that determined his entire future destiny. It was here, in the fire of the Civil War, in conditions where every day was a struggle for survival, that he first encountered artillery. He did not yet know then that this acquaintance would grow into a passion, into the work of his entire life. He learned to shoot, learned to understand ballistics, learned to feel the weapon. These were the first steps of the future God of War, steps that would lead him to the pinnacles of military art. The early 20s of the last century. The Civil War had died down, but the country had not yet recovered from its wounds. The young Soviet Republic needed qualified personnel, and artillery was no exception. It was then, in 1922, that Nikolai Voronov entered the Higher Artillery School. This was not just the next step in his education, but a real breakthrough. Here, within the walls of the famous school, he plunged into the world of complex mathematics, physics, and tactics, forming the very military technical thinking that would become his hallmark. He didn't just memorize regulations, he delved into the essence of artillery science, analyzed, questioned, and strove to understand every aspect. His inquisitive mind eagerly absorbed knowledge, and his natural talent as an organizer was already evident. His drive for improvement was obvious. In 23, after graduating from the school, Voronov received his first command position. He commanded an artillery battery, then a division. These were not just steps on the career ladder. They were a chance to apply the acquired knowledge in practice, hone his skills, and understand how theory relates to the realities of the battlefield. And he used this chance to the fullest. Voronov was not an armchair theorist. He was a practitioner who constantly sought ways to improve. He was not afraid to experiment, to propose new approaches to organizing artillery fire, to training personnel. His organizational talent was manifested in his ability to rally people around him, to inspire them to achieve a common goal, whether it was working out a new standard or conducting exercises. The 20s became for Voronov a time of active work on improving artillery science. He did not limit himself to his unit, but actively participated in discussions, published articles, and shared his experience. He understood that for artillery to become a truly formidable force, it was necessary to constantly develop its theoretical base, seek new methods of application, and take into account the experience of past wars. He was one of those who laid the foundation of the future Soviet artillery, the very one that would more than once prove its effectiveness on the battlefields. It is 1936. The world is once again poised in anticipation of a great war. Spain, torn by civil conflict, has become a true testing ground where new tactics were refined and the latest weapons tested. It is here that Nikolai Voronov is sent under the pseudonym General Voltaire. He is 37 years old, with the Academy of the General Staff behind him, experience in command work, but most importantly, an insatiable thirst for knowledge and a striving for perfection. Spain gave him what no exercises could: real combat, a genuine test of endurance. Here he saw how artillery operates in modern, mobile warfare, where the front is not static but constantly changing. He observed the actions of German and Italian artillerymen, analyzed their mistakes and successes, and compared them with Soviet developments. This was a baptism by fire not only for him personally, but also for the entire Soviet artillery school. Voronov actively participated in planning and conducting operations, personally leading artillery units. He quickly realized that old, trench warfare methods no longer worked. Artillery had to be not just powerful, but also mobile, capable of quickly changing positions, supporting advancing troops, and suppressing enemy strongpoints. He saw how important fire coordination was, how necessary it was to concentrate efforts on key breakthrough sectors, creating an artillery barrage. It was here, in Spain, that he began to formulate the principles that would later form the basis of the breakthrough artillery concept. He understood that artillery was not just a collection of cannons, but a complex, interconnected organism requiring clear command, reconnaissance, and communication. He learned to make quick decisions in a constantly changing environment, assess risks, and seize every opportunity. The lessons learned from the Spanish Civil War proved invaluable. They showed that victory in future conflicts required a profound reform of the entire artillery system. Voronov returned home with a vast store of knowledge and a clear understanding of what needed to be changed. Spain became a true laboratory for him, where theory was tested by practice, and his ideas took on flesh and blood. And these lessons were not long in coming. They would become the foundation for future grandiose transformations in Soviet artillery. Voronov's return from Spain was not merely a change of scenery, but the beginning of a new grand stage. He brought back not souvenirs, but invaluable experience that practically burned in his hands, demanding immediate application. The lessons of the Spanish Civil War, where he fought under the name quote, became the foundation for a re-evaluation of the entire Soviet artillery doctrine. He clearly understood that the coming war would be different, and old methods would no longer work. Artillery, in his conviction, had to become not just a means of infantry support, but an independent, devastating force. And so, in 1937, fate presented him with a chance to bring his ideas to life. Nikolai Voronov was appointed head of artillery of the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army. A colossal responsibility fell on his shoulders: the modernization of the entire artillery system of the country. This was not just a post, but a true mission. Voronov immediately set to work. He began with technical re-equipment, understanding that without modern weapons, without powerful and long-range systems, any tactical innovations would be useless. Under his leadership, work was launched to create new models of artillery, including high-power howitzers and anti-tank guns. He personally controlled the process, interacted with designers, demanded the impossible from them, but always achieved results. He didn't just order guns, he formed an entire philosophy of their application. But technical re-equipment was only part of the task. Voronov considered the creation of new organizational structures no less important. He understood that new principles of application were necessary for the effective use of artillery. It was in these pre-war years that the foundations of future breakthrough artillery were laid. He actively began to implement ideas of massive artillery application, the creation of large artillery formations capable of concentrating fire on decisive sectors of the front. Under his leadership, artillery regiments and divisions of the High Command Reserve were actively formed, which would become the backbone of future offensive operations. Voronov didn't just move artillery forward, he restructured its mindset. He trained commanders to think broadly, to see the battlefield as a single organism where artillery plays a key role. He introduced new standards, new methods of personnel training, emphasizing the importance of accuracy, speed, and fire coordination. This was a period of intense but incredibly productive work, when each day brought Soviet artillery closer to the heights it would achieve during the Great Patriotic War. He laid the foundation on which all future firepower of the Red Army would be built, capable of crushing any enemy. He prepared the artillery for great trials, not knowing that they would come much earlier than anyone could have imagined. 1939 arrived, cold, harsh, and not just climatically. The Soviet-Finnish War, known as the Winter War, became the Red Army's first serious test in real combat conditions after the Spanish experience. For Nikolai Voronov, appointed head of artillery of the Red Army, this was not just another battle, but a true test of his reforms, his ideas. For it was he who, for the past 2 years, had been actively restructuring the artillery, preparing it for future conflicts. And so, the clash with the Finnish army, stubbornly defending itself in the conditions of snow-covered forests and the powerful fortifications of the Mannerheim Line, revealed many painful points. It turned out that even after all the transformations, the artillery systems of the Red Army were far from always coping with the tasks set. Problems with fire coordination were particularly acute. In conditions of difficult terrain, limited visibility, and active enemy resistance, artillery sometimes acted disjointedly, not always managing to support the advancing infantry. Communication between units left much to be desired, and this, as is known, costs lives in war. The mobility of artillery units also proved insufficient. Heavy guns struggled to move through deep snow, getting stuck on forest roads. The Finns, perfectly familiar with their territory, skillfully used this, setting up ambushes and delivering sudden blows. This was a serious blow to the effectiveness of Soviet artillery, which, according to Voronov's plan, was supposed to be powerful and mobile. Nikolai Voronov personally attended the front, observing the battles, analyzing every shot, every mistake. He did not hide in headquarters but traveled to positions, communicated with commanders and ordinary artillerymen, gathering invaluable information. He saw with his own eyes how his plans clashed with the harsh reality of northern warfare. And these observations became a powerful impetus for further, even more radical reforms. The war with Finland, with all its complexity and sacrifices, became for Voronov a kind of proving ground that allowed him to identify weaknesses and understand what else needed to be changed for Soviet artillery to become truly invincible. He returned from Finland with a clear understanding of what needed to be done. A new round of work began, even more intense and focused. Very little time remained before the Great Patriotic War, and Voronov, without losing a minute, embarked on fundamental reforms. He understood that every mistake made now could cost thousands of lives in the future, and he was ready for this responsibility. He was ready to rebuild, modernize, and improve again, so that artillery would become a true god of war, capable of crushing any enemy. June 22nd, 1941, morning. For Nikolai Voronov, head of the main artillery directorate of the Red Army, this day began with stunning news. The Great Patriotic War had begun, and the blow was terrible. The first weeks and months became a real hell. The Germans advanced, sweeping everything in their path, and the Red Army suffered enormous losses. In this chaos, when it seemed that everything was falling apart, Voronov's main task was not just to preserve, but to save the artillery potential of the Red Army. It was like trying to hold water in a sieve, but he understood, without artillery, victory was impossible. From the very first days of the war, he literally spent days and nights at headquarters, coordinating the retreat, organizing the evacuation of guns and ammunition. It was a titanic effort, thousands of kilometers, hundreds of echelons, the risk of losing every barrel. He personally went to the most dangerous sectors of the front to understand the situation on the ground, assess losses, and make decisions that could cost thousands of lives. One of the key problems of the first months was countering the Wehrmacht's tank wedges. Soviet artillery, although armed with anti-tank guns, was not prepared for such a massive use of armored vehicles. Voronov immediately began developing new anti-tank defense tactics. He demanded that commanders create deep, echeloned defenses, use artillery to create barrage fire, and form mobile anti-tank reserves. He insisted that every gun, even a field gun, be considered a potential anti-tank weapon. Often, artillerymen had to engage tanks in direct fire, becoming suicide fighters, but delaying the enemy. This was a cruel, but the only possible tactic. In the autumn of 1941, when the enemy stood at the walls of Moscow, the role of artillery became critically important. Voronov, despite enormous fatigue, personally coordinated artillery support in all critical directions. He understood that the capital was not just a city, it was a symbol, and its fall could break the spirit of the entire country. Under his leadership, Moscow's artillery became an impregnable wall of fire. The guns worked without interruption, suppressing advancing German units, destroying their equipment and manpower. He personally controlled the supply of ammunition, the transfer of artillery units from one sector to another to maximize the strengthening of the defense. It was a time of incredible tension, when every day was a struggle for survival, for the future. And Voronov, like a true conductor, led this fiery orchestra, not letting it fall silent. He preserved the artillery, turned it into a formidable force even during the retreat, and prepared it for future victories that were yet to be won. The 42nd year arrived. A year that for many became a turning point. A year when the realization came, things cannot continue like this. Retreats, losses, the bitterness of defeats. All this demanded a new approach, a new strategy. And Nikolai Voronov, a man unaccustomed to accepting defeat, deeply contemplated the lessons of the hardest battles. He, more than anyone else, understood that to break through the powerful, echeloned enemy defenses that the Germans had managed to build in the occupied territories, a fundamentally different kind of artillery was needed, not just powerful, but capable of a massive, crushing blow. It was during this period, when the front stabilized and the Red Army was preparing for counteroffensives, that Voronov began to formulate the concept of breakthrough artillery. This was not just an idea, but an entire philosophy of warfare. He understood that the success of an offensive depended not only on the number of guns, but also on their organization, coordination, and ability to concentrate firepower on narrow sections of the front. His plan was to create so-called breakthrough artillery divisions, giant fists capable of unleashing a hail of fire on the enemy, literally grinding down their defensive lines. These divisions were not just to be a collection of artillery units, but a unified, well-oiled mechanism where every gun, every crew, every shell served a common purpose. Voronov developed the principles of their application, how these divisions should move, how they should deploy, how they should support advancing infantry and tanks, how they should suppress pockets of resistance. This was an extremely difficult task, requiring not only military genius, but also the ability to think several steps ahead. He understood that the implementation of this concept would require new models of artillery systems, more powerful, longer range, faster firing. And Voronov began to actively interact with designers. He didn't just set tasks, he literally lived in design bureaus and at proving grounds, discussing every detail, every technical solution. He demanded the impossible from engineers, but at the same time, he inspired them, infecting them with his energy and faith in success. His ideas formed the basis for the creation of legendary guns, such as the 152mm ML-20 howitzer gun, the 122mm A-19 gun, and many others that would become the core of Soviet breakthrough artillery. He was confident that these gods of war, united in powerful formations, would be able to break through any defense, paving the way to victory. And his confidence was not unfounded, for it was these ideas, born in the hardest years of the war, that would become the foundation for the future grand offensives of the Red Army. The year 1942 arrived, and Stalingrad loomed on the horizon, a city that became a symbol of resilience and a place of decisive battle. It was here, into the very thick of it, that Nikolai Voronov was dispatched, no longer merely the chief of artillery, but a representative of the Stavka of the Supreme High Command. His arrival meant one thing: the time had come when artillery had to have its weighty say to become a true god of war, capable of turning the tide of events. The Battle of Stalingrad was not just another stage for Voronov, but the culmination of his many years of work, a test of all his concepts. He arrived at the front not just to observe, but to personally oversee the organization of the counteroffensive, which would forever go down in history as Operation Uranus. And artillery was to play a key role in this counteroffensive. From the first days, Voronov plunged into work, coordinating the actions of numerous artillery formations. He understood that for the operation to succeed, it required not just massive, but precisely coordinated fire, capable of suppressing the enemy's defenses on a vast front, creating conditions for a breakthrough and subsequent encirclement. Under his leadership, detailed plans for artillery preparation were developed, which involved concentrating an unprecedented number of guns in the breakthrough sectors. Thousands of barrels, from light mortars to heavy howitzers, were drawn to Stalingrad, preparing to unleash a fiery barrage on the Germans. Voronov personally controlled the placement of each battery, achieving maximum effectiveness and concealment. He demanded from commanders not just the execution of orders, but a deep understanding of the plan, the ability to react quickly to changing circumstances. On November 19, 1942, at 7:30 in the morning, thunder struck. Tens of thousands of guns opened fire. This was not just firing, it was a real artillery hurricane that crashed down on the positions of Paulus's 6th Army. The sky over the steppe was covered with smoke and dust. The earth trembled from continuous explosions. Volleys followed one after another, giving the enemy no time to recover, paralyzing their defenses. This was a triumph of coordinated fire, the embodiment of all Voronov's ideas. Artillery punched holes in the German defenses, destroyed firing points, and suppressed resistance. Wehrmacht soldiers who survived this hell remembered it as something unimaginable, as the eve of the end of the world. The effectiveness of Voronov's concepts was proven in practice. The breakthrough artillery worked flawlessly, ensuring the rapid advance of Soviet troops. Soon, Paulus's group was in operational encirclement, and then in a complete ring. Artillery continued its work, methodically destroying the encircled enemy, giving him no chance of a breakthrough or organized resistance. It was thanks to massive and precisely coordinated artillery strikes that the conditions for one of the greatest victories of the Red Army were created. This was not just a success, it was a clear lesson in how properly organized and skillfully applied artillery can decide the outcome of an entire battle, predetermining the fate of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and officers. Stalingrad became the clearest confirmation that Nikolai Voronov was not just the chief of artillery, but a true god of war, whose ideas and decisions led to victory. After the triumph at Stalingrad, where Voronov's artillery demonstrated its devastating power, it became evident. The concept of breakthrough artillery was not just a theory, but a key to victory. The years 1943 and 44 became a time when these ideas transitioned from brilliant designs to large-scale practice. Voronov, inspired by success, did not rest on his laurels. He understood that every new operation required refinement, adaptation, and, most importantly, even greater precision. For the more accurate the fire, the fewer shells wasted, the more soldiers' lives saved. He actively developed methods for planning artillery offensives. Now, it was not just shelling positions, but an entire scientific discipline. Detailed maps of firing positions were created, considering terrain features, weather conditions, and the nature of enemy defenses. Every artillery strike was calculated down to the smallest detail, meticulously, like a chess game. Voronov paid particular attention to the creation and improvement of the artillery reconnaissance system. For without accurate data on target locations, without understanding where enemy firing points were hidden, any offensive risked bogging down. He actively implemented the use of forward observers, spotters, and aerial reconnaissance. It was then that artillery reconnaissance became not just an auxiliary service, but one of the key elements of the entire system. New targeting methodologies were developed, allowing for quick and accurate transmission of target coordinates from scouts to batteries. This reduced the time from detection to target engagement, which was critically important in the rapidly changing frontline environment. Artillery had to not just shoot, but hit the target precisely, suppressing enemy resistance before they could recover. The experience of employing breakthrough artillery divisions, born in the fire of Stalingrad, was further developed in key operations of the middle stage of the war. The Battle of Kursk, Operation Bagration, the Lvov-Sandomierets offensive. Everywhere Voronov's artillery played a decisive role. At Kursk, for example, massive artillery strikes not only thwarted the German offensive, but also inflicted colossal losses on the enemy even before the tank battles began. Soviet artillerymen created so-called firewalls, shifting fire as their troops advanced, literally paving their way through enemy defenses. In Operation Bagration, breakthrough artillery divisions demonstrated their ability to ensure the rapid advance of tank and mechanized corps. They suppressed resistance nodes, destroyed enemy artillery batteries, clearing the way for advancing units. This was not just accompaniment, but active formation of the battlefield, where artillery dictated its terms. Nikolai Voronov personally supervised the planning of these operations, constantly remaining at the front line to be aware of all nuances. He was not just a strategist, but also a tactician who understood how theory worked in practice. And every new success of the artillery, every breakthrough of enemy defenses, was confirmation of his brilliant ideas. He transformed artillery into a true fist, capable of crushing any enemy, and prepared it for new, even more large-scale victories. 1944. The war rages on, but the wind has shifted. The Red Army confidently pushes westward, liberating lands from the occupiers. And in this triumphant march, artillery plays a pivotal role. Nikolai Voronov, whose ideas and concepts formed the foundation of this firepower, receives well-deserved recognition. On January 15, 1944, he is awarded the rank of Chief Marshal of Artillery. This is not just another star on his shoulder straps, it is a symbol, a confirmation of his colossal contribution to victory, an acknowledgement of his virtually limitless authority over the god of war. Voronov didn't just command the artillery, he was its architect, engineer, and conductor. With this new rank came new responsibilities, and with them, an even deeper effort to improve the system of managing artillery formations. He understood that the larger the operations became, the more complex coordination became. Individual batteries, battalions, regiments, brigades, breakthrough divisions. All these links had to work as a single, flawless mechanism. Voronov actively implemented principles of centralized command while still granting local commanders sufficient autonomy for tactical decisions. He demanded a clear hierarchy, but also encouraged initiative. New organizational structures were developed, communication systems improved, and more effective planning and control methods introduced. Every commander, from platoon leader to front artillery commander, had to understand their role in the overall scheme, to see the entire picture of the battle. But artillery never acted in isolation. Its effectiveness depended directly on interaction with other branches of the armed forces. And Voronov, more than anyone else, understood this. He devoted much effort to creating methods for artillery interaction with infantry, tanks, and aviation. This was a complex task, requiring not only theoretical knowledge, but also vast practical experience. He organized joint exercises where various battle scenarios were rehearsed, where artillerymen learned to, quote, with infantrymen, tank crews, and pilots. The goal was singular: to achieve maximum effectiveness. Artillery was not merely to support, but to anticipate the actions of other troops, clear their path, cover flanks, and suppress enemy counterattacks. He demanded from his subordinates not a formal approach, but a deep understanding of the tasks of each branch of the armed forces. For example, before a tank offensive, artillery was not just to destroy anti-tank guns, but also to create, quote, in minefields, suppress machine gun nests, and blind enemy observation posts. Aviation, in turn, provided valuable reconnaissance data, adjusted fire, and struck targets inaccessible to ground artillery. Thus, step by step, Voronov created not just an army of artillerymen, but a unified, powerful fist, where every blow was precise and every action coordinated. He transformed artillery into a true conductor's orchestra, capable of playing the most complex symphonies of war, where every note, every salvo, brought the Red Army closer to ultimate victory. And this was just one stage of his grandiose work, for ahead lay the decisive battle for the enemy's heart, Berlin. April 1945 arrived. The war, it seemed, was drawing to a close. But before victory lay the final, most ferocious battle. The assault on Berlin, the enemy's lair. Nikolai Voronov, Chief Marshal of Artillery, understood that this operation would be the culmination of everything that had been created and refined over the years of war. He was tasked with organizing firepower unprecedented in its scale to break through the formidable defenses the Germans had built around their capital. This was not just a city, but an entire fortress, bristling with thousands of firing points, bunkers, and barricades. The Berlin offensive operation, developed by the Stavka, demanded the impossible from the artillery: to break through defenses on a wide front, suppress resistance in urban conditions, and ensure the rapid advance of troops. Voronov personally supervised the planning of the artillery preparation. He demanded pinpoint accuracy from his staff officers, understanding that every shell, every battery had to work with maximum efficiency. Thousands of guns and mortars, from light regimental to heavy divisional, were concentrated near Berlin. This was a true artillery fist, ready to unleash a fiery avalanche upon the enemy. Great attention was paid not only to the quantity, but also to the quality of fire. Voronov insisted that the artillery work on the principle of a quote, where fire successively moved deeper into the enemy's defenses, giving them no time to recover and occupy new positions. Special requirements were placed on the artillery that was to accompany the offensive in urban conditions. Here, not only powerful, but also maneuverable guns were needed, capable of destroying firing points in buildings, suppressing snipers, and clearing the way for infantry and tanks. Special firing methods were developed for the upper floors of buildings, for embrasures, and for underground communications. Artillerymen learned to work in direct contact with the infantry, literally directing fire at individual pockets of resistance. On April 16, 1945, at 3 o'clock Moscow time, the artillery barrage began. This was not just a shelling, but a true firestorm that descended upon the Silo Heights. Hundreds of thousands of shells and mines, in a matter of hours, turned the German positions into a continuous mess. The earth burned, the air trembled from explosions. No sooner had the enemy recovered from one blow than another followed. Voronov personally controlled the course of the operation, being at the front line to see with his own eyes how his artillery was working. He watched as the rolling barrage advanced, as pockets of resistance were suppressed, as the path for the advancing troops was cleared. The effectiveness of artillery in assaulting heavily fortified urban areas proved to be astonishing. Artillerymen, despite ferocious resistance, were able to ensure the advance of Soviet troops, suppressing every firing point, destroying every barricade. They worked tirelessly, day and night, under continuous enemy fire. The Berlin operation became the pinnacle of artillery art, to which Nikolai Voronov had strived his entire life. Under his leadership, artillery was transformed into a true god of war, capable of crushing any defense, paving the way to victory. And that victory was very close. The war ended. The last salvos died down. The victory banner soared over the Reichstag. But for Nikolai Voronov, Chief Marshal of Artillery, the work did not diminish. On the contrary, a new, no less responsible stage began: the preservation and development of the USSR's artillery potential in the post-war period. This was a task of colossal importance, because the bleeding country needed a strong army capable of defending peace. Voronov, with his inherent energy, immediately set to work. The primary task was to generalize combat experience. Thousands of artillery operations, millions of shots, hundreds of thousands of lives. All this required deep analysis. Under his leadership, special commissions were created, reports were studied, commanders and rank-and-file artillerymen were interviewed. Every battle, every success, every mistake, all formed the basis of a new, post-war doctrine of artillery employment. He understood that the lessons of the war, paid for at such a high price, could not be forgotten. They had to become the foundation for future generations. Based on this analysis, Voronov actively participated in the creation of a new doctrine for the employment of artillery in modern warfare. The world was rapidly changing, new threats were emerging, and artillery had to meet these challenges. He foresaw that future conflicts would be even more dynamic and destructive. Therefore, not only firepower but also mobility, accuracy, and the ability to quickly react to changing circumstances came to the forefront. But perhaps one of the most significant and, at the same time, secret areas of his activity was his contribution to the creation of nuclear artillery. This was the time of the Cold War, and the arms race was gaining momentum. Voronov, like no other, understood that the presence of such weapons fundamentally changes the face of future wars. He actively interacted with scientists and designers, formulating requirements for new systems capable of delivering nuclear charges over long distances. These were projects kept in the strictest secrecy, but it was precisely they that laid the foundations for strategic deterrence and ensured the country's security for decades to come. Simultaneously, work was underway to modernize traditional artillery systems. Voronov demanded from designers not just improvements to existing models, but the creation of fundamentally new, more advanced weapons with increased range, accuracy, and rate of fire. He cared about the comfort of the crews, the speed of loading, and the reliability of the equipment. After all, every artilleryman, every gun had to be ready for any trials. He understood that artillery is a living organism that must constantly develop to retain at the forefront of progress. And Voronov, like a true god of war, continued to forge its might, preparing it for new challenges. The post-war years were for Nikolai Voronov not only a time of recovery, but also a period of deep reflection. He, like no one else, understood that the foundation of the country's future might was laid not only on the battlefields, but also within the walls of scientific institutes, in design bureaus, and at proving grounds. His theoretical legacy is not just a collection of documents, but a living thought that continued to develop even after the end of the war. Voronov actively participated in the creation of numerous scientific works and methodological developments, which became the ABC for new generations of artillerymen. He didn't just share his experience, he systematized it, transforming it into a coherent system of knowledge, accessible for study. Under his leadership, new regulations, manuals, and textbooks on artillery were developed. In these works, he paid special attention not only to the technical aspects of artillery application, but also to issues of tactics, strategy, and the organization of inter-branch cooperation. He insisted that an artilleryman should not merely be an operator of a gun, but a thinking commander, capable of assessing the situation and making the right decision. The influence of his ideas on the development of Soviet military science was colossal. The concept of breakthrough artillery, born in the fire of war, became fundamental. He continued to develop the ideas of massive artillery application, improving methods for planning fire strikes, paying attention not only to suppression, but also to the destruction of fortifications, the annihilation of enemy manpower and equipment. His developments formed the basis for training command personnel in military academies and schools. Students studied Voronov's doctrine, analyzed his decisions, and learned to think broadly, as he himself did. He personally lectured, conducted seminars, instilling in future officers a deep understanding of artillery. No less important was the comparison of Voronov's approaches with the concepts of artillery application in the armies of other countries. He actively studied the experience of allies and potential adversaries, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. While many Western countries relied on aviation, Voronov continued to advocate for the key role of artillery as the primary means of fire destruction on the battlefield. He understood that even in the era of nuclear weapons, without powerful and accurate artillery, it would be impossible to win in local conflicts and provide support to ground forces. His works continue to inspire designers to create new types of weapons and commanders to seek new, effective tactical solutions. Voronov's theoretical legacy is not just history. It is a living science that continues to serve the cause of national defense. So, we have journeyed from humble beginnings to the pinnacles of military art, tracing how Nikolai Voronov, a man of astonishing insight and iron will, shaped the face of the god of war in the 20th century. But what is the significance of his legacy in the modern world, a world where technology has advanced far and wars have become entirely different? Today, when drones, high-precision weapons, and cyber warfare dominate the battlefield, it might seem that the Marshal's ideas, born in the trenches of World War II, have lost their relevance. But this is only at first glance. Nikolai Voronov's work in the development of artillery as a branch of service holds enduring historical significance. He didn't just modernize cannons, he changed the very philosophy of their application. His concept of breakthrough artillery is not just a tactical maneuver, it is a strategic approach to conducting offensive operations, based on massive and coordinated fire impact. The idea of concentrating firepower on decisive sectors of the front, creating a rolling barrage, suppressing the enemy until their complete paralysis. All of this remains relevant today. Yes, the delivery methods have changed, but the principle remains the same. Fire superiority is the key to success. In modern armed conflicts where local clashes and asymmetric threats often prevail, Voronov's concepts transform but do not disappear. High-precision weapons, satellite reconnaissance, automated fire control systems. These are merely tools that allow his ideas to be implemented at a qualitatively new level. Instead of thousands of barrels firing at areas, we see pinpoint strikes, destroying paths with surgical precision. But behind this precision lies the same intent: to suppress, disorganize, destroy. Modern artillery systems, capable of striking targets at vast distances with minimal ammunition expenditure, are a direct continuation of the development line that Voronov laid down in his time. He was one of the first to realize the importance of close integration of reconnaissance, command, and fire engagement. Today, this has become the standard. The creation of a unified information space on the battlefield where every sensor, every drone transmits data in real time allows artillery to act even faster and more effectively. This is not a cancellation of his ideas, but their evolution. The memory of Nikolai Voronov and his contribution to the victory in the Great Patriotic War is not just a tribute to a great commander. It is a reminder that even in the most difficult conditions, human genius, strategic thinking, and faith in victory are capable of working wonders. His name is forever inscribed in history as the name of a man who not only commanded the god of war, but also taught it to speak the language of victory.